Top chef Nobu Matsuhisa said that sushi is really all in its simplicity. And you know this, sometimes the simplest things are really the ones that are the most difficult. You have to pick just the right fish, get the rice just right, but it could only be as simple 2 or 3 ingredients, and that really is the beginning, the foundation to good sushi. Now you may be missing at this point your favorite sushi restaurant, but you know what? We can make it at home. We're never going to make it as well as a master sushi chef will. That apprenticeship takes decades, and once they become a master, of course, it is a very, very fine art. So I'm going to start off with the caveat that I will not pretend to be a master sushi chef, but I do know that we can have such a good time with beautiful ingredients, with delicious things that the entire family can enjoy, and I think they're probably something that everyone can do. And it starts out with something very, very simple. So the first thing that we're going to do is make our sushi rice. Something that may seem a little bit simple, but it's really important because it's the entire foundation for all of our sushi. So the first thing is you can use a rice steamer, or if you just have a saucepan, that's perfectly fine. And I'm going to start off first of all by showing you this rice, because what you may see in the rice is a little white fleck to it. And what you may not know is it's that white fleck called the endosperm, the interior that really gives it the texture. So things like risotto or arborio rice have that bigger endosperm that keeps it kind of almost what I would say is firm to the tooth. The other thing that's wonderful about sushi rice is that it has this large exterior that really gives it the starchiness, and that's what's going to hold it together and give it the texture. So you do want to have a sushi rice, and then we're going to take some water. Now this is about 1 cup of rice to 1.5 cups of water, and I've used a filtered water, and I'm just going to put it into the pan, and I'm going to let this sit for about 30 minutes. I just want to start it soaking a little bit, and then we're going to put it on the stove. Now the other thing that I need to get ready in the meantime is a mixture that's going to season the sushi rice. Because I don't know if you remember, but if you were to have a bite of the sushi rice all by itself, it has a little bit of vinegar, a little sweetness, a little saltiness, all of which, if you think about it, really accentuate the flavor of the fish. Now you can make this in 2 ways. I've got some water in a pan. I'm going to add a teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of sugar, and then if you want, now there are 2 ways that you can season this. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but this is rice wine vinegar powder. But of course, you can also use rice wine vinegar if you want to. Now the difference really is that you're going to get a brightness from the powder that you won't quite get from the sushi, the rice wine vinegar itself. Now I'm just going to combine this. And then we're going to move it to the stove to heat it up to dissolve. So come on over. I've got my rice that's soaking. And what I want to do is just get this mixture nice and hot. Now in the meantime, let me tell you what else we're doing, because we've got the fish ready to go. And the fish, actually, we're using Quarry Arctic salmon today, a stunning farm salmon from the Arctic Circle. Now, we can use different types of fish, even this salmon, in our sushi, as long as we do one thing. So the first thing is, I got to the fish counter, I asked for the Quarry Arctic, making sure I knew the type of fish, the quality of it, because remember, this is a simple dish that we want to make sure we have really quality ingredients. And then I asked them to take the skin off, or if you want, you can take the skin off. And let me show you what we have here. The most important thing then at this point is to cut it into fillets and keep it in the refrigerator for about 30 minutes. Now this is important because this, if there's any chance that your fish isn't quite as fresh, or if there's a chance that there are any sort of parasites in it, by law, depending on the state, all of the sushi restaurants that you go to freeze the fish. Now I want to show you this because the fish also becomes a little bit easier to work with. So I don't know if you remember, but when you go to the sushi bar, you know this, you see that everything is wrapped up with just the loin ready to go. Now, let's go back and get our mixture because probably it's nice and dissolved. And yes, it is. So you can see how everything has dissolved in it, and you can smell it actually. You can get that great, oh my goodness, just like really nice vinegary, bright flavor. Now I'm gonna get my rice. You know, in the magic of TV, you've gotta have another one going. This began, first of all, by bringing it to a boil. So you start off, after you've soaked it for 30 minutes, by bringing it up to high heat and allowing it to boil. Once it comes to a boil, you turn it down to low and you just let the rice steam for about 25 minutes. And look at what you get. This bright, beautiful rice, and you can see how it starts to form the little craters inside. And it'll be just a little bit firm and sticky. Really good. Now, I'm going to take it and I'm going to put it into a bowl. And you'll see I've got a damp towel ready to go, because now at this point, it's really important that the rice begins to cool. So I'm going to take the rice out of this pot. You can see, it doesn't stick. Very easy to work with. And if it is sticky, that's because it should be. You can see that right there. Make sure we get all of this out. Now you can do this, if you were, let's say, going to make all of this with the family, you can make it about 2 hours in advance. So sushi rice can be made about 2 hours in advance. And then what we're going to do is, we're just going to add our vinegar mixture, because again, we want to get this nice, soften it up just a little bit, and get it perfect for our sushi. So you can see, and I can smell it. I know that you can't, I wish you could, because the smell of it is so bright. It's got that nice vinegar flavor. So you want to make sure that it's well seasoned. And then the next thing is, I'm just going to cover this because I'm not quite ready to work with it yet. So we'll set this aside. We've got a damp towel, and we're going to actually take the towel. You want to make sure that this one is just a bar towel, linen free. And we're going to put the towel right against the rice. Now, if you had a steamer, that'd be great too, because you could push that towel right into the steamer and have it sitting aside ready to go. So the perfect thing to get started. Now, here's the other trick about sushi. Everything has to be ready, everything in its place. So of course, I've got my salmon that's ready to go. It's nice and firm, it'll be easy to slice. You need to have a nice sharp knife, and then I'm gonna get some other ingredients ready. We're gonna start off by making a California roll with our salmon. So we're gonna make a salmon California roll to start with. Now there are some things that are gonna make this sushi making process a little bit easier. One is we have a bamboo mat. So we have to have that bamboo mat to help us roll it nice and tight. I've taken that bamboo mat, and just to keep things nice and clean and make it a little bit easier, we've put a little bit of plastic wrap over it. And then I have a piece of nori. And I don't know if you all saw, on Tuesday I was talking about using different types of seaweed, and I had no idea that the majority of the seaweed that we use actually is imported. So it kind of makes sense, right? Imported from Japan. So we're going to take that and have it there. We want to have the smooth side up. And we're going to get our other ingredients ready. Now it's kind of like making a wrap. I don't know if you've ever tried to make a wrap or a burrito and all the ingredients came to the table and then you piled everything in it, you tried to wrap it all up, and then you went to eat it and everything fell apart. You almost couldn't fold it. Well, the trick here is that if we use too many ingredients, we're going to have a tough time rolling it. It's kind of like, almost like a pizza too. If you put too many toppings on it, you'll have trouble moving it over to the pan and be able to bake it, slice it, and get it out. So I'm going to make, it's going to be very, very light in terms of the ingredients. And these ingredients are really super simple. So we're going to use cucumber, we're going to use avocado, and we're going to use our salmon. And we need to start off first by peeling the cucumber, excuse me. Now, you know what I've said is that the key here is all in the ingredients. And I will tell you something, the Japanese are so precise about the way in which they prep their ingredients. So they would not want any of that green on the avocado. They would want it to be perfectly trimmed. So we can take this, I love these peelers. I'm sure that you all have seen these already. Sometimes I feel like I talk about something like this Kunra Recon peeler, but then you look at me and you say, well, you know, we've known about this for years. But if you haven't, this is one of the easiest peelers that you'll ever be able to use. I use it even like in a salad where I'll take these strips and be able to just put them into a salad or even with cheese. So we want to make sure that we get all of this. And we're not going to use any of the seeds of this cucumber either. So I'm going to teach you a little trick when I go to cut it. Probably not one that the master sushi chef would agree with, but something that I think is a great hack for you at home. So I want to get all of this off. I want to make sure that it doesn't have any of that remaining green. So you get the idea? Now, the other thing is we're going to cut this into julienne strips. So we want to make sure that we've got all of that and take maybe a little bit more of that off. You know, it's interesting. It's sort of like ginger. You know, the Japanese and Chinese are so precise about ginger. And I think I did a recipe a few weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago, where I said, you know, if we peel it all off, then it's a nice clean ginger. If we didn't peel it, it's called dirty ginger before we grated it. And they just don't want those kinds of things, that fleck showing in the sushi itself. Now let me show you what I would do to cut it into strips. It's very important, first of all, that you have a flat surface on the cutting board. You don't want your cucumber being roly-poly. So I'm going to cut just a little notch out of it. So then I get a flat surface. Does everybody see? And then what I'm going to do to cut this into strips is I'm going to cut around the seeds. So what I end up with, do you see, is the seed packet, those bitter seeds that I don't want to use in my sushi, is ready to, I might even chop it up and put it into a salad. So let me do that one more time for you. I'm going to cut a notch out of it just to be safe so that it doesn't roll around the cutting board. And then I'm going to cut around the seed packet. Now I do this with even things like melon. Daryl's filming and he knows he's seen me where I'll cut around the outside of the melon and I'll do the exact same thing. But here's the thing about this trick. The great thing about it is now you've cut the cucumbers into what we call planks. So always, whenever you're going to cut something into a julienne strip, you start off by cutting into planks. That would work with carrots, that would work with our cucumber, anything that you need to kind of square off. And then I'm going to just take my knife, and the idea is even and as precisely as I can, I'm going to cut it into strips. Now this is going to be the key, of course, for our sushi, because it's these strips that are going to have to go aligned with the salmon as we roll it. So you can see, we'll just get ourselves ready. This is all called, in French, the French call this mise en place, which means everything in its place. Now you don't have to remember that. Of course, we're making sushi and I'm talking about French sayings, but I call it mess in place, which means if you go to a sushi bar, they have every single thing ready. It's all in the prep. So you want to have it all laid out and ready to go. And of course, if you were getting this ready for the family, what you could do so that everyone can make their own is just get these little piles of ingredients ready to go, and then they can come and they can mix and match the flavors and be able to make it. So mise en place, our cucumbers are all mised out, as I would say. And then the next thing we're going to do is get our avocado ready. Now, the avocado. We use them a lot. You know that, I mean, I'm from California. You know that they have to be ripened by creating the gas to be able to start to ripen and soften. But did you know that avocado will never ripen on the tree? It's not like a pineapple or other types of apples or fruits. It will never ripen. So we have to pick it from the tree, If you bring it home, you want to keep it in a paper bag at room temperature until it's just the softness that you want. And because all of our ingredients, the key to all of this is the sweetness and the flavor of the ingredients, we don't want to refrigerate this avocado before we use it in our sushi. So now I'm going to take my hand, I'm going to put it over the top, and I'm going to cut that avocado by just turning it. Very simple. And there we go. Now, I'm going to take a spoon, and I'm just going to take that out of its skin. Now, if you wanted to prep it and get it ready, you could certainly do that. Keep the pit in it. Make sure that you keep the pit in it. It'll keep it nice and bright in color. And again, we'll just finish that last half. Now the trick with this also is that, believe it or not, we've got to get planks from our avocado. And that's a little bit more difficult than just doing it with the cucumber, because our knife is really going to stick. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut it across rather than cutting it as you normally would into slices. Because what I want to end up with are some little strips that are going to be perfect, lined up with that cucumber in the sushi. Get the idea? All right. So that's ready to go. We'll leave these other ones to the side. Alrighty. Now let's get our board nice and cleaned off, because now we have to get our salmon ready. And as I said to you before, I'm using Quarry Arctic salmon, and I have been working in salmon for a very long time, and I have never seen more pristine waters, a more beautiful farm than what Alf Born-Knudsen and his family do up in the Arctic Circle. So you can really rest assured that this is going to be a delicious, beautiful salmon that if you've taken it and you've cut it into these beautiful loins, that you can eat with confidence, raw, in your sushi. So now this is what we're going to do with this. Now you can see I've cut away that skin. I've cut away all of the fat. We've trimmed it into this beautiful loin, which is technically called a saku block. And then what I'm going to do, and I want to make sure you all can see this. Do you see there's a grain there? It's sort of like when you're making something, you might be more familiar with the grain if you were making a brisket or a tri-tip or even a piece of chicken. The trick with it, so that it's as tender as possible in the sushi, is to cut against the grain. So you can see, if I was cutting with the grain, I'd be cutting right along those, see those little lines? I'd be cutting right along with them. But instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut against the grain to just cut some of these strips. Now, this is the point where if we were being thoughtful about this and we had different types of sushi that we wanted to make, we could even do, I've got a nigiri there. This is even the point where we could cut it into nigiri if we wanted to. But in this case, what I want to do is once again, cut it into those strips so that I can lay it into the sushi roll. So every single thing that we have made has gotten cut into these julienne strips. Now in a little bit, we're going to make one that's a spicy salmon roll, a takeoff of a tuna roll, and this will take the next step of our julienne strips and we'll dice them. All right. So now you've got the idea with that. I'm going to wrap our salmon back up. We do want to keep it nice and cold. So let's just wrap it back up. If we're continuing to work on it or you're doing more, pull it out of the freezer as you need it. But one thing to remember, we're not trying to freeze this salmon frozen solid. It's going to give you a little bit of firmness, but you won't be able to slice it if it's perfectly solid. So we've got it where it's just beginning to give. Now, we're going to start to build our sushi. So I'm taking that bamboo mat, as you can see. This is going to be our little helper. I've got this little bit of plastic wrap over it, okay? Now, the next thing I'm going to do is sprinkle some toasted sesame seeds onto this plate. Now, here's the thing about any seeds or any nuts. And this could be the case for walnuts or pecans, or in this case, sesame seeds. You know, they are picked months ahead of when you buy them. And then generally they're put into some sort of a glass, a jar, or a plastic bag, and then sealed and sold to you. And what happens is these natural oils that are in these beautiful nuts and seeds dry out. And they tend to have a little bit of a bitter flavor. So I don't know, the way I relate it is that I'll say to you, if I take a bite of cookie and the cookie has a walnut in it, and I start chewing it, it can be chewy and a little bit bitter because the walnut never toasts and really cooks inside the dough. It just steams. Well, we don't want that to happen. We don't want that to happen in our salads. We don't want that to happen in our cookies, and we definitely don't want it to happen in our sushi. So what I do is I take these and I just in a single layer will put them into a warm oven, and that oven could be 350 degrees, and it doesn't take very long. Let me tell you, if I'm going to make a mistake in the kitchen, it's always putting those nuts into the oven and then forgetting them and then smelling that burnt smell of the nuts and then needing to dump them out and start over. So just put them in a thin, real thin layer. Toast them up a little bit, don't even leave the front of the oven, and then allow them to cool. And what you'll get is this lovely browning, so it looks a little bit better, but also it's got this warm, toasty nuttiness that's going to be a much better flavor than had you used them raw. So toasted sesame seeds, and here's the other tip. You can't do them way in advance. You want to do them right before you're ready to use them. So toast them, allow them to cool, and then come back and use them once they're cooled off. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this little bit of nori, as I had said. We'll peel back our rice, and I want to show you something. I've got this little towel, and I don't know if you've ever seen this in the sushi restaurants, but this towel is damp, and I've made it damp with water and vinegar. And it's going to act as my little hand towel as I make this. It's going to help the rice and all of the other ingredients from sticking to my hands. So I've always got this towel at the ready. It's gotten a little bit dry, so I'm going to add a little bit more vinegar and water mixture to it. And then I want to make sure that when I peel this rice back, that my hands are nice and damp. And then I'm going to take that rice, and I need for each roll about 3/4 of a cup. And again, if that rice is sticking, it's perfectly fine. We can take it, we can dip our fingers in the water, and you can see just by doing that, we can easily press that rice all the way to the edges of our nori. This is going to be about 1/8 of an inch thick. So just so that you know, you can move the rice all the way out to the edges, and we want it completely covered to about 1/8 of an inch. Now, these all can be made a little bit in advance, so I don't want you to feel like you have to make it a la minute at the last minute. You can make them an hour or two ahead, depending on the types of ingredients that you have in them. And that's because of the fact that the nori will get a little bit soft, which isn't what you want. You want still to have some firmness in this. So as I mentioned, this is about 3/4 of a cup of rice along the top of this nori. But I'm not doing a really thick layer, because if I do, I'm going to end up getting into trouble here when I go to roll it. All right, so here, Daryl, get a really good shot of this so you can see how we've got our rice along the outside and we've pushed it all the way to the edges. Now the next thing is we're going to take this and we're actually going to move it over to the, just over to the sesame seeds. And then we're gonna lift it up, and you can see how we've got it dusted with those sesame seeds. You could also roll it if you wanted to at the end. We're gonna put it back on here, and then I'm gonna flip it over. So this one's gonna be inside out. We're gonna do two different kinds. One is inside out, and then the other one is right side in, I guess we'll put it. So I'm gonna just turn this over, because on this little California roll, I want this one to be inside out. Now the next thing is our ingredients, and I'm gonna put them right down the center. I've got a couple of strips of our Quarry Arctic salmon, and we do want this to fit. So if you have to trim it a little bit so it fits all the way, just overlapping it slightly, you can see how I've got it to the edges. I've also got a little bit of our cucumber. So when I say to you, it really isn't a lot of ingredients, it really isn't. It's just a couple of strips of each thing, just lined up like so. And then I'm gonna do the same with the avocado. Just a little bit goes a long way. But you can see between the rice and everything else, it's gonna make for a really lovely roll. Now, what we're going to do is pull it towards us, so you can see how that goes. And then we're gonna take our bamboo and we're just going to begin to roll this so that it all comes together. You can see on the inside how it's just starting to get rolled, and as I'm pressing, I can press this, pulling it together just like this. Watch this very carefully. We're pulling it, as you can see, and then I'm gonna kind of almost squeeze it with my hands. So I'm pulling it and then squeezing it, and then I'm gonna pull it back. I'm gonna peel that plastic off, and you can see how we've got our beautiful roll. Now, the trick with this at this point is we want to slice it. And in order to be able to slice it, we want to make sure that we have a wet knife. So you can see how I've got this cut and ready to go, all rolled up. And then once again, I'm going to take that water, and I'm going to make sure that my knife is nice and wet. So we have a sharp, wet knife, and we're just gonna cut straight through to produce that beautiful roll. And there you go. You can see it right in there. Now the next one that we're going to make, you can see that right there, and we can put them here. I've got some that I already made with brown rice. So you can see one is the Quarry Arctic salmon roll with the brown rice, and then I've got some that I've made already. There, why not? Let's just cut one more. But the trick here, always remember, is that wet knife and a nice solid cut. Putting that whole thing together. All right, now we'll finish cutting those in just a little bit, because the next thing that we're going to make is we want to make our spicy salmon roll. So what we're going to do next is we're going to take our nori, and we're going to use a seasoned chopped salmon this time. Let's get all of this rice off of here. We're going to use a seasoned chopped salmon in this. Very, very simple. I've actually already started some, so let's clean up here just a tad. I'm going to put that seaweed down, and let me just pull some of these out of the way so we can get our other ingredients going. Keep everything together because we're going to want to make some more of these. Okay. Get our knife cleaned off, get our cutting board cleaned off. All right. So now, I've also got waiting for me in the freezer some of our pre-chopped salmon, but I did this because I wanted to show you something. Now, when I was cutting away the salmon and I was making those loins with it, of course, I had some scraps. And so I wanted to show you what this looked like as we got those strips cut away from the salmon. And what I can do with those is cut them into strips. You can see how easily it cuts when it's nice and firm. And then I'm gonna dice this salmon. And you can see how I get beautiful dices by cutting it into strips and then dicing it while the salmon was firm from the freezer. So the freezing really helps us in a couple of different ways. And then I'm gonna put it into the bowl. So these are ready to go. And the trick here is we're not putting a lot of ingredients into this. So the trick's going to be making sure that you have a nice fine dice so that you get all of those flavors all together. You can see we've got that really cold salmon. I've got some of those sesame seeds and some onion, a little bit of sesame oil, just because we want to get that brightness of flavor, and some sriracha chili. Now this obviously could be added to taste. It's completely up to you. But look at how lovely that is. Got a little bit of color to it, a little bit more flavor. And of course, we've got those sesame seeds as well. So now, back to our rice again. We're gonna take the rice, dip our hands, get that mound going. I'm going to wet my hands again so that nothing sticks. Dip those fingers in there. And then press that rice to the edges. I think you're all getting the idea. Here, just pressing that rice to the edges in a thin 1/8 thickness. And you don't have to get all the way to the edge. And one tip I will tell you is that generally you don't get the end of the sushi roll. I guess that's the bite for the chef, although I've never been at a sushi restaurant where I've seen them take that bite. But you do almost like with a wrap. You want to clean that edge. And there we go. So everybody gets a sense of how that looks. And then I'm just going to take a thin layer, and this is the only thing going in here, is that delicious Quarry Arctic salmon seasoned with sriracha at the edge of this roll. All right. Now, as we had already seen, to roll this together, what we want to do is use that plastic wrap just a little bit to get going, okay? And then we're going to just roll this and fold it over. And in this case, as we're using that bamboo to help us, we're tucking it in, we're getting it sealed around the edges, we're pulling it so that it's all coming together, pulling it to the side, and then just pressing it like so that all of it comes together. Making sure we're all tucked in here around the edges, and then undoing it just slightly so we make sure we're all sealed, and then we'll unwrap it, and then we'll be ready to slice it. Take those few couple pieces off the edges. So the idea here really is that, we've got a nice solid strip here. We'll cut it with we'll cut it with our wet knife. We're getting that nice and wet. And then you'll see, I want to show you while we cut it. I've actually done some of these in advance with the brown rice. We've got a beautiful one that's just our sushi with the spicy salmon. We've also got one of the little nigiri, which is just by mounding that sushi and getting that sushi rice on the top and getting strips of that beautiful Quarry Arctic salmon. And then, of course, our spicy tuna roll, our spicy salmon roll. So delicious, wonderful, nutritious, easy to put together, all from Quarry Arctic salmon. You can find these recipes on our blog at www.quarryarctic.com, and I hope it really inspires you. It doesn't take a lot, just simple, delicious ingredients to make a fun, nutritious meal that everyone in the house will love. See you next time.